Hunt's worship service, sort of, in your living room, or wherever you happen to be, I guess. I hope that today is beautiful and that everyone is safe and healthy. As we worship today, I really don't have any announcements. We're going to continue to try to meet in fellowship and in meetings through Zoom, and if there's interest based on the fellowship feedback, we might try restarting Bible study that way as well. But you'll find information about that in emails and Facebook, and we'll get the word out as we know it. Right now, we don't have any plans of that sort. We're working on it as we go forward. But it's lovely to have you here, or wherever you are today, and it's lovely to worship God with all who come to join us. Welcome to Hunts. As we turn now to our joys and concerns and our shared life together in prayer, I just mentioned a few things as we move into prayer. First, I'd like to remind everyone that for specific joys and concerns and prayers, if you contact Beth, then she's keeping a list and keeping the congregation of praise through the prayer list that she's distributing every week. And so if you contact Beth, we will make sure that list of specific prayers gets to the congregation and to all who ask for it. In general, there are a number of concerns that I would raise. First, there's been in the news several senior centers and similar high-risk facilities that have reported problems with COVID in the news. One of them in Catonsville, and so it's in our neighborhood too. So be in prayer for those who are in special need and in high-risk situations. Also be in prayer, of course, for caregivers and for those who are providing all of the necessary functions that allow us to eat. I was recently told that it's sometimes confusing as to what is and is not, what's it called? The required jobs. Essential work. Because, for example, there was a soup kitchen that was trying to package up soup in containers, and they couldn't find lids and bottoms that would match, and they can't buy them because they're not being produced because those are not essential jobs. So it's a very difficult and confusing time with all sorts of strange and unusual issues and needs. In particular, I would call your attention to one that I think is very, very concerning, and that is that we are having trouble with the food chain. And if the food chain fails, then all sorts of terrible things happen. But the first and most awful of them is the places where food is marginal and where their ability to find that food is very limited locally. Starvation will begin. The UN is warning that if we don't fix the food chain problems, that we could have a biblical scale famine where millions perhaps are compromised or at risk. And so I just invite you to pray for our food chain workers, and all of them really are essential. From the truck drivers that carry it to the grocery stores that provide it available to customers, but to the farmers and the processors and everybody that's involved, the canners and people that make it happen so that this food is not wasted. We've heard of tons of potatoes put back in the ground, and chickens and cows being slaughtered because they can't be processed into food that we can eat and that can be preserved. And so be in prayer for those who are in special need in that regard. And of course, do be in prayer for each other. We are a community of faith, and that prayer list that you get is an important way that we contact and communicate with each other. And I just invite you to be responsive to it and pay attention to it. It's one of the ways that we stay connected and that we stay a community. Let us then turn to God in prayer. God, we ask that you be with us as we shelter in place. And some of us are working and some of us are home, seeking to be non-carriers or non-vectors of this disease to protect ourselves, but also our neighbors and our community. And so, God, whether we wait or whether we work in a higher risk environment, we just ask you, God, to be with us in this time. It is a very difficult and challenging time for a number of reasons, including loved ones who are at risk and who are suffering. Some have been diagnosed, and a few of our loved ones have passed. God, we just ask that you be with all those who are struggling with health issues right now, with those who care for them and those whose jobs are so essential to our being able to live lives of joy and of food. It is a joy to hold one another up and to encourage, to offer up our lives and our circumstances to you, because, God, nothing is larger than you are. Nothing is above your ability to respond and care. Nothing is beyond your capacity to make good things come of it. And so while the circumstances we are in are hard, we know, God, that you are bigger, stronger, and more able to transform even death into life. And so we trust in you, even in a time like this. And we trust ourselves and those whom we love into your care, knowing that you are able to turn even disaster into hope and resurrection. And we will just continue to give you the praise and the glory for all of your good gifts, but especially for the gift of your Son, Jesus, who gave himself for us that we might live, and on Easter received your stamp of approval in the form of an empty tomb and a resurrected body. Not just for him, but that through him all of us might find hope, even in the darkest of situations. And so we conclude our prayer with the words that he taught us when he prayed. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Psalm 23 responsibly. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want.
He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters.
He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake.
Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me.
Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over.
Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Our scripture lesson for this week comes from the book of John, chapter 10, verses 1 through 10. Very truly I tell you, anyone who does not enter the sheepfold by the gate, but climbs in by another way, is a thief and a bandit. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep hear his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. They will not follow a stranger, but they will run from him because they do not know the voice of strangers. Jesus used this figure of speech with them, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. So again, Jesus said to them, very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and bandits, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters by me will be saved and will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. This ends the reading.
As we turn to our scripture, let us take a moment to pray. God, we just thank you for the chance to gather together, even in our different locations, but to gather together around your word and to think about it together. Use this time, God, to bless us and strengthen us and to encourage us because in this strange and unusual time, we need more than usual encouragement. And so God, be for us that encouragement. Remind us who we are and whose we are, and that you're not yet finished with us. That your voice does in fact call us, and that these words, written so long ago, still make a difference. Strengthen us by them, God, and use us to accomplish your will. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Well, in John chapter 10, we have a lovely image, and I couldn't resist this one of the four lectionary texts because of the sheep. And of course, we have such a setting to talk about the sheep and the shepherd. This story isn't the lost sheep like our video, like our stained glass, but it is the shepherd and the way the shepherd cares for the sheep. The shepherd is known by his sheep, by his voice. They know his voice, and so they trust him and follow him. That's because the shepherd lives with his sheep. The shepherd is there all the time, day in, day out, night in, night out. And he takes them where there's food and takes them where there's water and guards them at night with his own body across the door of the sheepfold. And they are safe and protected. But, as this passage points out, the sheepfolds were not unique to each shepherd. They built one sheepfold, and all the shepherds in the area gathered there at night after they had eaten all the fields around while they migrated on their path. But how do you keep, then, the sheep separate? Well, it's pretty simple, really. The shepherd calls, and his sheep know his voice, and so his sheep follow and gather together in their flock, and he takes them where there is good food to eat and water to drink, and guards them. They know his voice, and they don't know the voice of others, so they don't follow people whose voices they don't know. This is what Christian life is supposed to be about. We live together in community, led by our shepherd, the Lord. And the Lord's voice comes to be for us a source of hope and of strength and of assurance. And we learn to hear the Lord's voice in our lives and in our community and in our circumstances. And when we do, we know to trust and to follow and to rest in that voice of our shepherd. The shepherd, then, continues to guide and protect and thrive. Why? Well, some who might come, who have different voices and different goals and different purposes, might come, as our scripture tells us, like thieves and bandits. They come not because they want to protect the sheep, but because they want to use the sheep. They want the sheep to serve their needs. The shepherd ultimately is going to have to do some of that too. The shepherd does care for the sheep, and, there's a reason. But the shepherd is invested day in, day out, season in, season out, spring, summer, winter, and fall, to care for these sheep. And the sheep know it. They know that they are precious and that if lost, they will be found. They will be protected and cared for with the life of the shepherd. And they know to trust. The shepherd, Jesus in particular, says, I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. The reason that we listen to our shepherd's voice, the reason that we come to know the voice of the Lord and to trust in it, is because in that voice and in that obedience and in that way of living, there is life, and life abundant. Too often, people think that Christianity is about following these restrictive and narrow rules, that it's about living in this sort of, do's and don'ts. Do this, don't do that. Do this, don't do that. And yet, who wants that? Nobody wants that. Even God doesn't want that. We are not about being bound by rules. We are about being protected from our own worst influences and our own worst instincts, so that we can live freely and richly without the costs and the consequences of that trespass upon our best selves. The shepherd doesn't take us to places where there's danger. The shepherd doesn't take us to places where we will wander off. Now, that doesn't mean we don't sometimes wander off on our own. But the shepherd isn't laying traps, isn't looking for ways to trip us up or to count how many sins and keep the tallies accurate. The point of the shepherd and the shepherd's voice and the shepherd's call and the shepherd's life and invitation to us is that we might have life and have it abundant. And so the sheep that learned the shepherd's voice, the sheep that lived in community together, in connection with their shepherd, in connection with their Lord, those sheep learn to trust. And in trusting, they are free to live and not be consumed with worry and fear and guilt and doubt and all of the things that can trap us, that can keep us from living the kind of abundant life God intended for us and that God made us to enjoy. The shepherd came, Jesus came, that we might have life and have it abundant. I want to tell you a brief story. Some of you may have heard this before. But one time I was called, by somebody in the community who looked up the local church and found the pastor, called me up and said, "Pastor, can you come out and visit?" And I said, "Sure, when and where?" So we set up a time and they gave me the address and I went to visit. And it was a 93-year-old woman who was desperate for assurance and hope. Her life was ending. She was dying of a number of different complicated medical issues, including smoking-related lung cancer and some other things. And she had lived a very hard life. And she told me all about the struggles and trials of her life. She'd lost a child. She'd had several marriages break up. And life had been very, very hard for her. There had been illnesses and struggles and financial difficulties. And she was nearing the end. And she wanted to know that it was okay for her to come to Jesus now, that it wasn't too late. Well, scripturally, it's not too late. And so I gave her the gospel. I told her that Jesus said that all who call upon me, if I knock and you answer, I will come in. But the invitation is to all, even to 93-year-olds who have lived hard and sometimes awful lives. But after I was done, I was glad that she could receive some hope and some assurance and some sense of comfort. But I was grieved. Imagine going through a life filled with that kind of struggle. A life of loss of a child, and of relationships, and of hope, and of love, and of struggling and suffering. Imagine going through that alone. How terrible to not have the shepherd's voice when you need it most, when life is hardest. How horrible to have to struggle through the slings and arrows of this world alone. That's what I understand abundant living to be about. Abundant living can sort of be summarized in the Footsteps prayer, which I'm not going to read for you, but I'm sure some of you have heard it. If not, then I invite you to look it up. Google will find it for you. But in the Footsteps prayer, there are two sets of footprints in the sand, but there are parts where there's only one set of prints. And those, the poet notices were the hardest times in life, looking back at his living. And he asks Jesus why in those times he was alone. And Jesus says to him, "No, my son, in those times I carried you." That's what abundant living means for me, is that in the hardest times, we are not alone. We are carried by our shepherd. One sheep is in serious danger, but all of us together protected by our Lord. Well, it's not that bad things can't happen, but they're never the only answer. And they're never faced alone. Amen. The theology of communion is interesting and somewhat disputed, but the things that we know about the Lord's agape meal is that all are invited, and the Methodists welcome all. John Wesley thought that this was the greatest way to invite others who are not part of the faith to come and experience Christ for themselves. And so in that spirit, even though we are separated by time and space and circumstance, I offer an agape meal celebration in remembrance of what Christ did for us. So I invite you, if you haven't already done so, to acquire some bread and juice of some sort to celebrate with me and with all those who join us this day from around the world. You can pause and then start. All right. Now that we're all together and ready, we celebrate this day the memory of Jesus' invitation to the table. On the night that Jesus was betrayed, he took bread. He gave thanks to his Father, he gave it to his disciples, and he said, "Take and eat. This is my body, which is given for you. Do this as often as you shall eat it, in remembrance of me." When the supper was over, he took the cup. He gave thanks to his Father, gave it to his disciples, and said, "Take and drink. This is my blood of the new covenant, poured out for you and for many, for the forgiveness of sins. Do this as often as you shall drink it, in remembrance of me." And so, in remembrance of these who are mighty acts of Jesus Christ, we offer ourselves in praise and thanksgiving as a holy and living sacrifice, in union with Christ's offering for us. And we remember the night in which Jesus offered himself. And we ask God to bless our meal together, our elements of bread and cup, that in them we might experience the body and blood of Christ, that we might become the body of Christ together, and that we might be redeemed by his blood. Not just we who are in this room, but all who gather with us this day across the globe and across the ages, as we come to the table of our Lord. And so I invite you to partake of the bread and drink of the cup in remembrance of Jesus. May God continue to bless you.